Well, hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Jim and Rob Overanalyze Movies, the live video podcast for people who are looking for a deeper conversation about the movies we watch today. Got an interesting show for you tonight. Jim and I are actually going to be revisiting a film we've already watched. Of course, that is Dune Part 2. Yeah, let's get into it. That's right, folks. We're going to be doing a revisit of this. I will put a link to our original show up here somewhere. But before I introduce my co-host with the most, let me beg you all for a like, a subscribe, and why don't you give us a little ringy-dingy of that bell. And with that out of the way, let me welcome my co-host with the most, the man, the myth, the legend, Mr. My Borscht Bro, Mr. Jim Chaboyko. How you doing, my friend?
Keeping it real, as they say.
It is Louis Riel Day here in
wearing my Riel shirt, so
Winnipeg, Manitoba, Canada.
I get out of the mothballs to a couple times a year I put this thing on. It's a Festival de Voyageur also, so that's sort of a good occasion. Not a direct connection, but
well, you know what? It is interesting, given it's day 76 of our under threat of annexation from our neighbors to the south, that it is Louis Riel Day. Not only the leader of the one of the leaders, not the leader, one of the leaders of the Red River Rebellion, but people have made a very effective argument. One of the reasons the Western Canada isn't a part of the United States is because of the establishment of the provisional government led president of Louis Riel, and the local Métis and Indigenous populations resisting that kind of annexation, kind of going, which imperialism are we going to do business with?
Yeah,
we're stuck with one of Jim. We're stuck with one of these assholes.
Yeah. Who has the better record, the English or the Americans?
So great. That is a great shirt to be wearing, and thank you very much for noting it. All right, let's get into the show at hand. Yeah, that's right, folks. It is going to be Dune 2, and here is the log line from IMDb. Where are we here? Ah, yes. Paul Atreides unites the Fremen while on a warpath of revenge against the conspirators who destroyed his family. Facing a choice between the love of his life and the fate of the universe, he endeavors to prevent a terrible future. Oh, my goodness. Well, Jim, that certainly isn't as bad as, what am I thinking? I'm Still Here. Which we did see just on the weekend, didn't we?
Yeah, 2 days ago.
Folks, I will put a link up here. I'm just finishing our Cedar Skip It reaction, so I'll put a link here if you're watching this on a replay. Of course, it'd be even easier if you just subscribed and rang the bell. But back to the movie at hand. Jim, you and I did catch this in the theater last, February when we saw it when it came out.
It was almost this time of year. It was towards the end of February. I have a date of March 1st, but I don't know if that's accurate or not. But yeah, end of February anyway.
We did the live stream, the full bore show, Jim, on March the 5th.
Is that what it was? Okay.
That's when it was posted. Let me ask you this. If memory, terrible belch. If memory serves, neither of us were really swept away by this outing. since then, has your opinion changed? What would you say before we get into the spoiler zone?
Mhm.
Would you say it's a see it or a skip it?
Oh, definitely you see it. It's got spectacle, and I think it's arguably a lot. Whether it's not perfect, but it's got some more depth than a lot of science fiction out there today, and it's a different offering. It's something big that's not Marvel, for instance, and yeah, it's I would definitely recommend it.
Yeah. You know what, Jim? I'm gonna say it's a skip it unless you're really a fan of craft.
Mhm.
Yeah, I if memory serves, I was not the biggest fan of it, but I think I was giving a really qualified see it. Now it's like, no, you could skip this. There is no there there. For all its 2 hours and 45 minutes of epic scope and amazing sound design and oh, the effects, the portentous performances and everything, that in the end, you're just kind of going, well, that was a movie, all right. Um, now that we've done that, I've crapped all over it. Let's, why don't we, if you're cool with this, let's jump into the spoiler zone. Jim, how does this sound? Can't believe I did not minimize that. How does this sound?
Mhm.
What I want to know, how does this sound? I don't know why I'm even asking that. I'm going to ask the question anyway. What do you think Villeneuve's message is with this film? What do you think it's about?
Mm. Yeah, I think it's that's a good one. It's about the rise of a hero and savior figure, but
I should
I
have been clearer. Sorry, I meant like, what do you
yeah.
think he's really saying with it?
Well, I think that there's a danger. I don't know if it's expressly about sort of cult of personality, but maybe prophecy instead. That there's a danger behind belief systems that you, and I think that's embodied by the Chani character, is that she's having none of this, and everyone around Paul is there for the ride, but she's the one. She's sort of the conscience or the critical thinker saying, "Yeah, this doesn't feel good. This doesn't feel right. How things are going." So I think it's a little bit of the danger of prophecy and fully buying into a belief system.
Yeah.
We haven't gotten there that yet. The tricky part is that it's the middle part, and I think things will come to a head with a third movie.
Yeah.
And so we'll see what happens there. But
Yeah, I'm not asking about the
yeah,
third movie.
yeah.
It's about the movie. We have two
Well, no,
movies.
I'm
By
saying
then,
it's
if it all
yeah.
changes in the third movie, well, then this was all BS anyway.
Well, it's sort of the way
What
there, right? It's
is
the path that
what
it's
is
taking. So
this
this is
movie
just
about? At the end of
heading.
this movie,
Yeah. Well, it's the rise and fall,
you know,
and so this is the rise part of it.
yeah. What and this is, I think, one of the reasons why I say this is a skip it. Unless, oh, hey, if you want to know almost how not to tell a story, maybe this is it. I agree with you, Jim, that this is, for all its now several hours of film, he's really just making a comment on religion. He's said it as much in interviews. He is, and I think if you want to understand where he's coming from, familiarizing yourself with the Quiet Revolution in Quebec, the fact that he was raised Catholic and has since walked away from that faith, but still has a worldview affected by it, but also affected by the secularization of Quebec society. It'll help you understand why this film is focused on that, but I think that's one of the things that's why this film is weak on a storytelling aspect. First of all, by the time you get to the end, we should, if it's really following that track, we're at the highest height before the fall. It should have the triumphant ending that the first book did.
Mm-hmm.
You know, even though we see hints in the first book that, and in Lynch's, I can't believe I'm praising Lynch's Dune from 84, but at least there you get an idea of the good guys won.
Mm-hmm.
Here, you're really kind of, I was left at the end of this film, and the second time watching it, it's like, yeah, I don't care. I don't feel that triumphant end. I don't feel like I am whipped up into a yay, oh, but maybe. I feel like, she's running off. So we're going to reduce her to just, if she is that, not just conscience, but that analysis, that the atheist in the ointment,
Mm-hmm.
the radical in the ointment, she was running off because he's doing an imperial deal. So she's running off because she's pissed about it. And it's like, well, that doesn't seem to really fit the theme. But really by the end, from a storytelling perspective, I'm let down, and I just, much like a Star Wars movie, I'm like, I'm not, we'll see Dune 3,
Mm-hmm.
of course, but I'm like, I don't. It'd be like a reset. I won't actually care much about any of these characters, and I'll be, well, let's see what happens in this last movie. Maybe, you know what? My palate has been completely cleansed. Another thing is it is about religion and the dangers of, let's say, prophecy and everything. But
Mm-hmm.
I think this is where I think Villeneuve his analysis is actually kind of superficial. If we think about the story from a different level, what is it really? You've got the nobility, and then let's say the space witches, the magical Bene Gesserit,
Mm-hmm.
the cynics, both of which I would say are the atheists in the operation. And through their own machinations and their own ignoring of the peasantry, their own ignoring of their effect on regular people, of seeing them as just things that they act upon and control and use and consume, end up doing something that in the end blows up in their face. They create not one, but two weapons. The environment and exploitation create the Fremen.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the Bene Gesserit's machinations, they also set them up to be taken over by a savior, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the meantime, the Bene Gesserit and their machinations, they actually create the thing they want, this Kwisatz Haderach, this super being, except that lose it, and it finds the worst possible thing for all concerned. The Fremen. The Fremen are set up for them through no intent other than the nobility and the church, let's say, the stand-in for the church, and their own bullshit. And so, who is the first to be wiped away, who's the first tragic, is the nobility and the Bene Gesserit. And we should feel that, and I don't feel it at the end of this movie. Two, I don't, I remember one of the things I enjoyed about the book, one of the things I think Herbert got right, was he just seemed to have a lot more respect for the communities of faith, especially First Nations communities.
Mhm.
in indigenous communities. Um, and so they were a lot more sophisticated. They were less like if you, it was rewatching this film where they come into the siege. And I'm thinking, Jim, it's like, oh my goodness, it's like I'm in one of these, like I'm in Luxor in Egypt with the sand everywhere and everything's kind of a ruin. It doesn't feel lived in. And they're all just standing, milling about, being like the angry Arab street. The
Yeah.
pictures, the bigoted pictures that we'll see in Western news media,
Mhm.
and them screaming at the white guy. And it's like, I think it's just hyper simplistic. It doesn't give these people any credibility. So it's not even, can you say by the end of it, you're really a fan of the Fremen, or do you even care about them at all? Other than
Mhm.
beyond, well, I should care about these poor people, but do you care about them? Whereas, I mean, in the book, and not so much in Dune too, but in the book at least, you're like, oh, I want to be a Fremen. They're cool. They're
Mhm.
boss. And they are sophisticated within their context, like we all are. And that's so by the end of it, you get none of that. And you're just sort of left with, you know, Chani, who's been built up as this, like you say, this character who is supposed to be that antidote, or at least that, well, not Cassandra, but just somebody whispering and saying, "You're mortal. This is all bullshit." Even to her other fellow Fremen, and they're all becoming crazy. And she's, what the hell? She doesn't run because of that. She runs because he does an imperial deal.
Mhm.
And that I think is just, it just guts the film of any meeting for all 2 hours and 45 minutes. And I swear to you, Jim, that's some padded BS. Like in the first 30 minutes, there's a repeat of what the Fremen do with bodies. It's like that could have been one just really cool scene where they both realize, oh, they're sucking the water out of the, like, and then done. But no, they hammer it.
Yeah.
They keep hammering it. We already had a couple hour movie, 2.5 hour movie where, oh, water's important here. And
Mhm.
yet it's like, nope, we're going to spend another 45 minutes on this. And I'm being a little hyperbole, but, and so it's all this padding, all this. And even as people talk about this film, they're not talking about, oh, my heart broke when, or it's all super reductive. It's the great scope, the epic scope, the great sound design, the cinematography. They talk about it as components,
Mhm.
but not like, I mean, Jim, I don't know. We saw you and I saw I'm Still Here. We talked about its craft. It's certainly up there, but I won't forget getting choked up at the end.
Mhm.
You know, I like I felt moved multiple times. And I don't know, did you ever really feel moved by this film?
Well, I felt charmed, and there's certain scenes where things are coming together that they have a long chat. And I know you criticized it the first time about it sort of taking a romantic turn in some of the choices that it made. But it was a sort of a lengthy scene. They're getting to know each other still, and it's basically their first kiss. I mean, that for instance, that's a scene where you're sort of rooting for both of them. But towards the end, I think it's really, it could be just I mean, you mentioned it being overstuffed, but there's a lot of ground to cover. I think maybe somebody who's telling the story can get lost in some of the details. I mean, look at I was writing out the members of the cast yesterday, and
Oh,
it's a
excuse me.
very long cast, and most of them we all know. There's like a dozen fairly major actors in them, not including other some of the supporting characters. There's a lot of moving parts in this, and not just to
Yeah.
defend him, but I think and
Well,
yeah,
he
it's 2
cast
hours.
it.
Yeah, oh, exactly.
It's not,
Well,
I
it's
was
based on a
forced.
it's
They
based
gave me millions upon millions of dollars and a cast of whatever size I wanted. What could I do?
It is based on a book, though, and the book has characters that you have to incorporate. Now,
Do you
if I
have
wanted to
to
get
though?
really particular, and this is
Yeah.
whatever. I didn't really care about the emperor and his daughter. I know it's an important part and it's part of the book and da 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 da, and at least other things, but I was just bored with that
Well,
aspect of it.
and
So that
and
would be about one of my main
and part of it
Christopher
is
Walken and,
because
and
they
Florence Pugh.
gutted the
But
tone out of it. Like
yeah,
it didn't work because wasn't really any conflict there.
mhm.
You
Or
know,
it was imported conflict. Like and yeah, they were sort of like in one certain area, and then they kind of
yeah.
they
Even
come
in
into the
the
story and then they show up
yeah.
on the planet. But I I just think that there's a lot of ground to cover.
Well,
I have a friend who writes off the Lord of the Rings series because Grima Wormtongue and Saruman in the movies didn't take over the Shire like they did in the book.
yeah.
And he said that's most of the paraphrasing badly, that's most of the point. And it is a big, there's other big parts that are missing. There's, I don't know if you like Tom Bombadil or not, but that part is a fairly, like, it's almost, when you're a kid watching this, you're reading it and you think, oh my God, I thought the story was over. They wrapped up everything and now they got to deal with this. And it is a fairly big part. And you see how the
Yeah.
four have changed when they come back. So that's missing from the movies.
How they've all grown up.
It's not even in the
Yeah.
dance mix, the
Yeah.
4-hour DVD versions. So, I mean, that's an example of some of the choices that a director is
And
forced to make
terrible cut.
over when they're doing a movie
Yeah.
version of a beloved book. Yeah. So I think there's difficulties there. I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. But I mean, I took a look at the Wikipedia.
But coming back
entry.
to this, yeah.
Well, just one sec. I took a look at the Wikipedia entry. It just says Dune Part 2 is the second part of a continuing space opera, and I thought, there you go. That's the difference between maybe book and movie. Is that maybe the movie experience is going to, when compared to an initial book.
Well, here's the thing: you either really trim it down. Like I kind of get the 2 movies, but could have been a lot more efficient, or screw it, make it a big mini series. If there was a text that would have been great as a mini series under this kind of creative force, it's this. Because that's the other, you don't get, there's this Warpath against the conspirators. There's no intrigue. You never really get the idea of the political machinations that are going on as they think that, as they all believe, Paul's dead and these Fremen are just a big pain in the ass. Mm-hmm. That they don't even, that they're still kind of operating, their whole world has changed, and they're still operating as though none of it's changed. And that because they don't know what they don't know because of who they are. Mm-hmm. And I think that could have been captured better. Heck, even as I'm saying it, gotta have a TV. No, you don't. Star Wars did it. Star Wars manages to imply this bigger world and that kind of machinations in a couple of scenes. It isn't until the very end. And even then, it's Darth Vader going, oh, the Force is strong in this one. They were always just the friends of the princess. The princess was the one on their brain. It was destroying that they didn't understand the forces they were actually up against. Mm. And that is in many ways why the Death Star blows up. I don't feel that in this. And you know what? I am not a good enough storyteller to tell you exactly why. Sometimes we're watching such a hot mess or a weird failure. I'm thinking it's not personal, where you can kind of go, there's your problem. This
Mhm.
doesn't have that, but I understand it enough to go, yeah, this is missing something. You know, like in another 5 years, if you're not talking about the production design, no one's going to have those moments where they were moved. I mean, I am not as big a fan as others of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, but how could you not get choked up at the end
Mhm.
when there's Aragorn saying, "You bow to no one"? Jeez, I'm
Mhm.
getting choked up now, Jim.
Yeah,
And that is because
there are guys.
I I gave a about every one of them.
Yeah, yeah.
Everyone. What do you talk about? You know, when we talk about this, you talk about Boromir and that his death had meaning
Mhm.
and that his redemption had meaning because it was told well enough that you could get into it,
Yeah.
you know? Whereas here, I mean, Stilgar becomes kind of a cult member, and it's like, but yeah, unlike in the book where I'm like, you only it's hinted at the end, or it's actually said at the end, but it's like in such a quick moment, you're like, oh, that'll all work out. Um, because you want the big win
Mhm.
before it all goes to crap. Whereas here, it's yeah, I don't care about this Stilgar. You know, by the end of the second movie, I'm just, I don't care. Eh, eh. I'm
Yeah,
not
I
that
mean,
big in the Fremen, and I'm also deeply again coming back to I don't think he actually respects any kind of community. Like he's very much the guy who fell out of faith is still mad that people believe in God. And I say this as an atheist myself,
mhm.
but he's mad at them, and so he makes them look bad, and the church is you can almost it oozes. I'm not saying that is in the Bene Gesserit writ large, but it in making this lady Jessica such a cynical
Mhm.
manipulator of these idiot peasants. It's really kind of like, yeah, a character that you feel for becomes someone you're like, oh, this woman again. Jesus.
Yeah, on the I watched a little bit of our own review just to refresh what we had been talking about last year, and I
What
think I
was
was
I this negative?
no, and I think I liked it more. I mean, I liked it obviously more than you did the first time as well. But I, for instance, noted how chilly. Both versions and the book, they're and that Lord of the Rings has sort of a warmth to it. It's based on certain elemental things like friendship and community, and that I guess this is as well. But I even as a kid when I was reading the books, it's just everyone was so put their hand in the box, like just like it's just not, there's no comfort really. There's that I remember the needle. Did they even have that in this
Yeah,
the first one of this one?
yeah, they
The
did.
needle
Yeah.
was flying around.
The
You couldn't
Gom
even
Jabbar.
trust yeah, you couldn't even trust your own environment. You had it was all sort of about all the different kind of political groups or
Systems.
the
Yeah.
interest groups that had their own motives and things like that. So there wasn't a lot of warmth in the first place. I was sort of with the book. I was caught up in you know watching it or reading it and trying to figure out what was going on and where it was leading. With this one too, it's there's a little bit more, but yeah, I think you well, for me, I was so busy, trying to think, okay, well, what's going on here? What's going on there? Maybe it's that cool and hot thing, right? This is less about heart than say Lord of the Rings was, and more about sort of
Yeah, you know what? I
not
think the
not
difference between the two is certainly, let's say, the Lord of the Rings is in a way a big kind of morality play.
not that it's a natural
It's
comparison, but we just
about
seem to have,
character,
yeah,
you
yeah,
know, and love, individual, very much on an individual scale,
yeah,
love and fellowship, agape
yeah.
love.
It's right in the title.
Um, very much agape love, very capital C Christian in its
Mm,
aesthetic, and conservative. I don't mean conservative like we do now.
yeah.
That was not Tolkien's conservative worldview, but whereas here, very much 1960, late 50s,
Mhm,
we're actually learning how we impact the world. We're really now starting to understand just how much we impact our environment and how our environment impacts on us.
mhm,
And I think that's what Herbert is writing about. But he's writing about a character. I think you do. I was into Paul.
mhm.
I want it not in the movies, but in the book, because he's so young.
Yeah.
He's 15. Um, the way he draws, I was into him, I was into Jessica, and to a degree, Stilgar and the Fremen, because the Fremen really are a character,
Mhm,
you know? And so the way he wrote about them, getting into the details of living in that, which is the way Paul is adopted into the tribe, which really I think is just one of the true tragedies of these first two films, and one of the great moments in the book is the how he is adopted, how he earns his place amongst them in a few key moves that really I think ring in the heart.
mhm.
And then they go to this siege, and it seems like a living village of people, whereas here you kind of see this sort of a dusty place of people milling about, looking dirty. uh, they don't it does not in any way look like a village. It looks like a
Mm.
mob, just an angry mob in a Egyptian ruin, instead of yes, it may be underground, it may be hidden from the outside world, but in the book you get a really clear image of a thriving place that lives and breathes and has its own pace and everything. And it's like, we just, no way do you get that in this. They'll just sit in the sand up against carved walls. They're almost, and no way of thinking, oh, these are the people that built this.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean that's a good point. And maybe miniseries would have been able to sort of establish that a little bit, better.
I,
Um,
or even just like a Game of
some
Thrones series. But
Yeah,
even in this film, it's like, yeah, other films somehow managed to communicate these levels quicker,
mhm,
you know, but it's almost like, here you have all this time and he's got one thing he wants to harp on, you know, and it's like, okay, so we end up with a Paul that we're kind of, okay with.
mhm,
Channy, it's like, I get why. How do you do Channy as she was originally written in the book? Now that would be a tough one, because she doesn't in the book have as much to do,
yeah,
But again, partly it's because her and Paul are so young at the start, whereas here it's like, no, I mean, heck, Zendaya, which is probably in her early 20s when she was first starting to
Yeah.
shoot the film, like they are adults already. So there's a challenge there. I don't think he met that he was up to the. I do not believe he was up to the challenge, Jim. And yes, I know this is the guy who did Sicario, who did Polytechnique. I mean, but this I think was, I don't know, too many studio notes. Who the heck knows?
Yeah.
You know, you're gonna say something there, sir?
No. I just, yeah.
Well, here, why don't we do this? I do want to talk about, regardless of my feelings about its storytelling and how it gives some of the older themes short shrift, I do think there is a politic to this film.
Mhm.
Why don't we talk about that? And by that, I really mean, let's talk about the social nutrition checklist,
Yeah.
Jim.
There you go. Nice segue.
Getting better at it. Jim, I'm giving this a score of 50%. It would not get a reframe stamp, but this will be interesting to all out there who care about this stuff, all 6 of us. You can now, they have expanded the reframe stamp program so
Yeah.
that if you are a French film, perhaps called The Substance, you can apply for an international feature reframe stamp,
Oh.
a thing. I do. I suspect they're like, we're really going to say Corley Farjas, The Substance doesn't qualify.
Yeah.
But this one definitely would not. No amount of Zendaya is going to make this get that stamp. It is union made though. It's a big Hollywood production, union made labor. I would say it does pass the Bechdel test.
Mhm.
And then last but certainly not least, and this is the segue into the politics of it all, Jim, is does it have a working class perspective? And I would argue that's a big fat no. To me, Jim, this very much is it's worse than not having a middle class or a working class perspective. It really does. The film itself looks down on the regular schmoes in this world. It refers to them. We meet a couple of them, but the closest we ever really get to that kind of person is in the Fremen. And for the most part, they're rabble, or they're
Cannon fodder.
cannon fodder, religious chumps.
Mhm.
Even that point in the book, at least, there's a moment where
Yeah.
there's some pushback from Gurney Halleck about how Paul uses up that cannon fodder, the converts from the cities, and is very much a Stalin-esque, can't make an omelet without breaking some eggs, am I right?
Yeah.
And you get a hint of that in this movie, but I think otherwise it just doesn't care. It's checking off a box. Well, that was in the book, but mostly, just as this even doubles down on it more, it's about a noble son getting back his due. What due? This isn't your planet. It's not the Emperor's to give away. It's not yours. The Space Witches, it's not theirs to manipulate.
Mhm.
And because I think he's so focused on religion being the bad guy here, he misses Villeneuve and the other filmmakers miss the real point of it, which is, you keep playing these empire games, eventually it's going to blow up in your face.
Mhm.
Even Paul, who is, like I said when we first talked about the first film, he is a curse upon the Fremen, but in the end, he too, like Oedipus, has to become scarred, has
Yeah.
to face what he's actually done and who he actually is. And there's consequences for that. And I think this film rejects that because it's like any other, we see this all the time in our current discourse. There's no in-depth analysis. It's religion's the bad guy here, and it's like, is it really? Or it, or how about it's the way the powerful will exploit any tool to keep squeezing us all,
Yeah.
you know? So yeah, that's kind of my take on what's really going on here politics wise. What do you think? What beyond what Villeneuve is trying to say here,
Mhm.
what do you think of the subtext? Is there anything you think I'm full of crap, or is there
No.
something else that I've missed that you're like, oh, and you want to look at this too? What do
Well,
you
I
think,
mean,
Jim?
the signet ring that he has from his father does a lot of heavy
Mm,
lifting in this one, and I don't know that I remember. I mean, it's sort of the visual, right? The visual of what he's due, perhaps. Also a symbol of revenge.
yep,
And if you had to weigh one over the other, I'm not sure which way I'd go. Whether it's more important to like there's a big thing where he puts the ring on, right? They
yep.
make he doesn't just turn his back and do it in the washroom. He takes it out and he puts it on, and for instance, he makes the emperor kiss it, right? And
Channy never says, "Oh, where'd you get that?" "Oh, it was my
yeah,
dad's," and I just felt like wearing it. What do you
it's
think? Does
so
it make
heavy
me look
around my
cool?
neck. These movies and these rings. I don't know what the deal is, but yeah. So I noticed that a lot more on repeated viewings is how much a role that played visually, and
Yeah.
I think that does encompass, you know, uh, his motivation, right?
Yeah.
Amongst
But
other
yeah,
things, is that this is my car. I want it back, and it was my dad's car, and now I want it. It's a classic.
yeah.
The But then he's also motivated by revenge too, and when he makes the emperor kiss it, he's shoving it into his face.
Yeah.
He knows, and he's letting Buddy know that his father was targeted.
Everybody here knows
Mm, yeah. So I
I'm
think
the
that
man now.
I think that's I didn't really sort of realize the importance the first time I saw it, perhaps, but on repeated viewings, I was like, oh yeah, okay, that's a big deal. We're seeing that for a
Yeah.
reason.
Well,
But
and I think that's like, if we just think about the character and even ignoring my critique of the storytelling, it is, let's say, the text it's based on.
Mhm.
One of those themes is the tragedy for Paul is he makes all the wrong choices that all seem to make sense at the time. There, you can understand why he makes them. Why wouldn't you want to avenge your father and
Mhm.
get back your birthright? Even though he could have just married Chani, truly committed to the community that adopted him. Of course, you don't get back your thing, or maybe you got to take the longer view,
Mhm.
really commit to the Fremen way of taking back the planet. And part of his struggle as a character, which I don't think was handled well in the film, but is there even in the film, is I want my cake and I want to eat it. Why can't I? I have to figure out a way where I can have both. I want the future I want that involves me taking this back, but I don't want the actual consequences of it. And the only way to do that is either the golden path or rejecting it all and just staying there.
Mhm.
Just just having your moment, much like I don't think it's ever even alluded to in the movies. May have, but in the book, there is a moment where I think it's the Reverend Mother talking to Jessica, talking about the Spacing Guild. It may have been a flashback or may have actually been in a scene, but saying, the Spacing Guild decided it was just gonna drink from the river, but not get in it itself. It could have gotten in it, had its moment in the sun and disappeared, but it's like, no, we want to live forever, and now is doomed to be the parasite.
Mhm.
And I think that in a way is one of the bigger themes of the heart of the story, is it's like you can't live forever. You will just become that, and even then you just can't live forever.
Mhm.
Everything has an end, and you can't have it all. Everything you want has consequences.
Well, all empires fall,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
So
and of course, yeah, it might fall on us, Jim. Uh, just wanted to quickly give a quick shout out. We've got Shashank is in the
oh, hey,
house.
Shashank.
Great to see you
Hello.
there, my friend.
I had to see for
Shashank,
myself.
we'd love to hear if your opinion has changed about Dune 2. Came out, of course, last winter, up for a Best Picture Academy Award here in 2025. Do you, though, think is it increased in your estimation or is it dropped? In mine, it has dropped. Jim, I'm seeing even saying skip it. Jim, of course, is still thinking it's a see it, a good see it, but would you agree, Jim? You're
I
maybe
mean,
not as enthusiastic about it as you were when we were out of the theater for all intents and purposes?
it is. It is. I mean, it is almost a 3-hour movie, and you gotta sort of, not don't have too many drinking boxes before you go in. But it works. I think books and movies are different, right? And I get what you're saying, and I understand your points. And yeah, some of them are make you sort of reconsider what's going on, especially the treatment of the Fremen, that sort of thing. But that definition of it being a space opera, as a space opera, it's completely watchable. Like I felt myself delivered. Had a great sense of spectacle to it. Does it lack the subtlety of the main text? Yeah, obviously. And um, could it be better in other ways? Sure. But I've seen it 3 times now, and yeah, I find different things every time, and I quite enjoy it. There are shortcomings, but yeah, I still I'm maybe, if only because it's not a Marvel movie. I don't
Uh,
know, but and it feels like a bit of a different kind of science fiction movie as well. But
Jim?
as a space opera, it works for me.
Yeah. Jim, Shashank, here's his comment, but at first I have to preface it with, Shashank, get out of my head. It's like he was listening to the first part of this podcast.
Oh,
He says, I never connected with either of the two movies. The
no,
craft of the movie is impeccable. Absolutely. Like, it's beautiful. It sounds great.
yeah.
You know, superbly acted. Wonderful performances all around.
Hmm.
But for some reason, this movie never impacted him. And
Wait a
I,
minute, is that really Shashank writing that? Or is it just
well, this is the
just
thing.
kidding?
Like, I'm wondering, come 5 years from now, 10 years from now, are we going to have those moments we remember, like we remember in, the Lord of the Rings,
Mhm.
where it's like, geez, even thinking about it, you get a little choked up.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, or in whereas I'm thinking about this, maybe not quite, Jim, as ooh, as the Phantom Menace,
Mm,
but I mean, I remember sequences in it
mhm.
that were remarkable, like the pod racing sequence. That's awesome. The final fight, except for the very end of it, but the final fight, just banger. I
Yeah.
mean, just everything is just so good. Um, will we remember Dune in that way? Scenes, sequences, but in the end, we're not going, wow, I was moved. You know, at the end of this, are we going to go, wow, I want more. I want more of this character. You know, coming back to Lord of the Rings, when they leave, you know, and what did you call it? The super deluxe DJ
Yeah, the dance mix.
dance, the dance mix, the
Yeah,
extended dance mix.
extended
But
bit actually, yeah, those.
yeah, when they leave at the Great Havens, when Samwise gets home, and you're like, yeah, it is over. Like it's,
Yeah,
you know, it's done.
that's true.
He's gone, and it's just like even now you can feel that. It reminds me, Jim, I was traveling with friends, met them in it sounds so bourgeois, but I had a
Like
job
the
that
top of the slopes for some cheese and a
uh,
charcuterie board.
well, I had a job where I could travel. I had a job that paid me enough I could do some traveling. So I was meeting friends in Prague. I spent a few days with them. We had some wonderful times. And we're talking like going shopping at the Tesco out in the suburbs of Prague, where actual Czechs shop to make a feast in our rented apartment. One of the highlights of the whole trip.
Oh yeah,
Pissing away an afternoon in a cafe nearby. Just these moments. So when I get on the train, I'm taking the night train I got to go back to Paris to fly home. One more other amazing city name to slip in
yeah.
there. But I get on the train, I get into my little cabinet, and I cried, Jim. I was just suddenly overwhelmed with emotion.
Mhm.
And I was crying. And it was like, but I wasn't angry. I
Yeah.
wasn't sad. It wasn't happy tears either. But the poignancy.
Mhm.
And, you know, I feel that even now at the end of The Lord of the Rings, I can watch it now. I can just watch those moments.
Yeah.
And that feeling comes back. And I think in 10 years, no one's going to have those memories about Dune. They're not going to have it about Dune 1. They're not going to have it about Dune 2. And given that it's all the same players and it's all going in a certain direction, I don't think Dune 3 is going to be any better. But of course, we'll watch.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, yes,
Shashank says there are specific sequences in the movie that I keep revisiting. The opening scene, 10 minutes especially, keep revisiting specific scenes. Shashank, are you talking about the opening of the Dune 1 or the opening of this film, Dune 2? Would like to know which and why you think those worked for you. Were you in part admiring the craft?
Mhm.
You were about to say, Jim, sorry.
No, I remember that the whole ending of Lord of the Rings. It's the door shuts, right? The Sam's
Yeah.
door. He's home, and that's
Yeah.
it. And he's just
Well,
like,
I'm home.
whoa, my
He's got a
friends.
kid in one arm and his wife in the other, and
Yeah, I'll never see them again. But
yeah,
yeah,
you and you value the time together,
mhm.
you know? And unlike the never-ending The Hobbit,
Yeah,
it's like, oh, thank God that's over. No, I'm good.
yeah.
Sure, we'll visit again.
Yeah, that's
Honey,
taking
get the kids in the car.
that's taking a beating a bit there, that one, but over time. What was I going to say? I think in a few years' time, I sort of wonder if there's a couple things that I wonder if they're going
Yeah.
to hold up or not. And one of them is the portrayal of the Harkonnens. And yeah, it's effective, but it's so over. I think we were referring to their fire blurks, you know, like liquid fireworks and everything black and white, and the shaved head, and
Yeah.
the killing of servants, and like they- they're not they don't have facial hair, so they can't twirl their mustaches, but that's not the Harkonnen thing. But it's a few steps short of that,
Yeah.
and there's a differentiation. They're freaky, they're easy to hate, but it's that thing, and it's sort of why I didn't love The Dark Knight, is because the Joker is based on chaos, and all his operations required order,
Yeah.
right? And it's just like, oh, we got to sync the ferry schedules up and stuff. He would not be capable of that, and no one would work for him, frankly, because he's so
Yeah.
crazy.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's a whole other
Well,
thing.
coming back
But
to the
so
Harkonnens.
the
Yep.
Harkonnens just sort of, you know, hey, are you the head of operations? Yeah, I'm just gonna beat your head into the control board until
I
you
know,
die.
right?
And like that's not you're not rushing towards success with that kind of approach. But so they're a little bit overdone, I think.
Yeah.
It's visually appealing in a certain way, and Austin Butler, I think, did a fairly good job. But they're if they're not cartoonish, they're getting there.
Yeah.
And the other thing too, I was going to say, is anytime there's any kind of secret about somebody's identity, why does it always have to be family? Like, oh, he's secretly my grandfather. I mean, this.
Oh yeah. It just. I mean, the only thing we could give some credit to is at least Herbert did this decades ago. It
Yeah,
wasn't some shoehorned in weirdness later on.
yeah,
Um,
that's true. But it's
Coming
always
back
like
to the
whenever there's
Harkonnen.
any kind of like so many things
Yeah.
there's a bit. If you're watching something that's a mystery and it's based on what's this person's identity, what's this person's relationship to me, he's probably one of your parents or your grandparents. Just say that episode one,
Just
10
assume
minutes in,
it.
just assume that it's a family member and you won't be upset. But anyway.
Coming back to the Harkonnens, and Shashank, I will come back to your comment. You did update us. But regarding the Harkonnens, Jim, I do like, and I think we can even blame the original text on this. Although there were moments with them where you kind of get the idea that he's a bastard, but that there is an outside world that kind of makes sense. He is, a little less, and he'd be more like Henry VIII,
Hmm.
dangerous, capricious. While at the same time that there are people who want to be around him because money and drugs flow from it. Like one of the characters in the book, at least, he's hooked on drugs, and
Yeah.
that Harkonnen uses that. The Baron uses that. It's like, well, no one's around me because they like me, which is really, I think, half of his character beef with
Mhm.
the Atreides, especially Duke Leto, the father, is that he has loyal troops who love him and will die for him. Whereas they're all mercenaries that he's
Yeah.
got a hook on money or drugs or, well, really money and that which it can buy, drugs, sex.
Mhm.
That's it. And fear. That's all he's got,
Yeah. Yeah.
and he's that kind of noble. And I think in the book, though, later on, especially as we get to know some of the other characters, you get a better idea of it's like, this could be a real place.
Mhm.
I'm thinking about the scene in the stadium, the
Yeah.
Colosseum scene, where one of the characters notes to his wife, actually played by Count Lady Fenring, played by Leia Seydoux in the movie, he notes to her, say, "Yeah, look at the blast shields. Not all is he is not loved like he wants us to believe he's loved, because
Yeah.
even Harkonnen is afraid of his own populace."
Mhm.
You know, just like somebody else, perhaps just south of us. Um,
Yeah.
I mean, and I think that is when, because they lean into the cartooniness and the weird,
Mhm.
they,
I
they
mean, it's fun.
become, but it's
It,
not. All of a sudden, you're not as afraid of him as you could be.
yeah, yeah.
Because
Sorry,
he's
I should
yeah.
qualify that the murdering of servants is not fun, and the the
No, but
the
that
the, the assault of others is not
yeah,
fun. But sort of that kind of making them so, I mean, literally black and white.
yeah.
But I would also say that the Baron's other beef with Atreides is probably his complete lack of goiters, at least in the first movie. But
Yeah. All right. Shashank says he was referring to Dune 2. Anything with eclipses and deserts always captivates him. Well, that you see that influence in Shashank's own work. And I
yes.
felt this movie captured that vibe for him brilliantly. It's something personally, anything with the desert he loves.
Mhm.
Shashank, you must have loved, like, one of the sequences I did kind of, oh, this will be fun, is I don't think it's the greatest thing ever filmed, but it's still a really solid sequence, is when he finally rides his own maker, that he gets up on the sandworm. He becomes a man in the eyes of the village.
Mhm. Mhm.
And that's a great sequence in this flick. It's cool.
Yeah, yeah, no,
It's
no,
big.
no
It's
argument here.
and it's super effective, even watching it on a small screen, but it was great in the theater,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
and even the whole thing, the setup with the two hooks and the stance and
Yeah,
they show him slowly rise to his feet, because I think you have to. It's almost like
it's
weightlifting, where you have to
surfing.
have your knees not
Yeah,
locked, but you have to be fully extended,
yeah,
right, for it to count. So you can't do it, on your knees. You have to be, you
yeah.
have to be a Fremen. You have to be
You gotta
on,
stand up.
stand up.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Well,
but
are you surfing or are you
yeah,
kneeboarding?
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah, if you're not doing the whole
yeah.
um, all right, Jim, let's, you know what? I think this is a revisit. Let's move into, dare I say, final thoughts. And that goes for you too, Shashank. Would love to hear what you, maybe if you could give us a good capture of your feelings on this, both films, or you might have already kind of said it. Did not impact you like it could have. Jim, I'll throw it over to you. What are your final thoughts on Dune 2 in this revisit?
In terms of Fremen characters, one that I sort of overlooked and I came to appreciate eventually was Chani's friend, and I've written it down because I called her shakshuka earlier, which is, we all know, is an egg dish. But it's Shishakli, so it's not that different from shakshuka. But anyway, played by I think she's Tunisian and Swiss actress named Suhelia Yacoub. She's a friend of Chani's, right? And
Yeah,
they sort of they
a
grumble and they
comrade.
gossip, and she's a bit of a toughie. I thought she was fascinating. Austin Butler's character takes her out at
Fade
the end.
Ruatha, or
Yes,
Routha,
I
however
was
it's
gonna say
pronounced.
Sting, but that would be wrong. Yeah, he takes her out at the end, but I thought, oh, she's quite interesting. It's a shame we didn't have more of her, and that may be sort of connected to a lot of what you were talking about, is that we didn't see. I mean, big long movie already, but that was kind of an indication of who the Fremen were. She was tough, and could hold her own in battle, and eventually died. So we won't see her again. But yeah, I thought it was kind of a
Yeah.
neat character, and it took me a couple viewings to actually appreciate that character. Anyway.
But and maybe seeing more of her, or seeing more
Mhm.
of a group like this, and him really a part of that
Yeah.
group, maybe a window into who the Fremen were.
Yeah.
And again, though, beyond just fighting,
Hmm.
that they did more, that they were more than just this random fighting group out in the woods.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and I know it's not woods, but out in the dunes.
Hmm.
Uh, Myself, Jim, I think more could be said about Villeneuve's view of religion and how it affected the storytelling in this film. Um, but that would be, in a way, belaboring a point. It's funny. I mean, I have some rather strong opinions about the politic of the film. The fact that it's not even if it's a bourgeois film. It's got a bourgeois worldview. It has a terrible opinion of the peasants. It's very much we need leaders who will caretake. Servant leaders. That shit. Um, but the filmmaking or the storytelling is not there. No one's going to be talking about this movie in 10 years. They may be talking about sequences, but they're not going to be going, wow, this was the definitive Dune retelling. There's going to be somebody with far more influence than I do who's going to be going, how long do we have to wait before we can give it a Game of Thrones treatment? Because I really do, Jim. I think that's if Dune is ever going to be seen as in live action or animated, I don't care which, if it's really going to get the adaptation it deserves, I don't think. I think the best thing would be in a Game of Thrones style TV series. You know,
Hmm.
you know. Um,
Yeah, give it a bit more time, and the expectation that you need time, the 5 to 6 to 8 hour length that
yeah.
you wouldn't dare put out into the movie theater,
Yeah.
quite frankly. So
Although we're going to get that depending on how long Dune 3 is,
yeah, yeah.
you know. Jeez. All right, folks. First of all, Shashank, he says, I love The Lord of the Rings personally. I wanted to get both of your opinions on Peter Jackson's King Kong. What are both of our thoughts on that? That is a great question, Shashank.
Hmm.
Jim,
Oh,
do you want to take a crack at it, or shall
well,
I
I'll
go
tell
first?
you one thing is being Winnipeggers. It's currently, Shashank. We plug our cars in so they don't not start in the morning. It's called a block heater because it's minus 30 or so. We're going through our cold snap. So with that in mind, when we watch, I remember watching Naomi Watts at the top of the Empire State Building in winter with only a nightie on and climbing down metal ladders, and you get the cold critique from all the pros. We're like, oh, she would never last. She'd have hypothermia. That. So that sort of gets in the way. I'd have to watch it again, quite frankly. It's been a year since I've seen it,
Yeah.
and would like to read up about it a little more too, because apparently he put in sequences that had been taken out of the original and sort of gave it his treatment, almost an Eggers like treatment of Nosferatu. I likened it to that, made it maybe the motivation there.
Really?
Yeah.
You know what? I remember seeing it in the theater, Jim. I still remember the creepy pod things they're like worms with teeth and they suck people in, and like it really leaned into those
The Weird
jungle
Island.
horrors
Yeah.
before they even get to.
Yeah.
And I gotta admit, I kind of every now and then it comes up, a reference comes up, and I'm like, I really should watch that again.
Yeah.
Uh, I can't say I was emotionally connected to many of the characters, um, but that said, yeah, it might be interesting, especially if there is the a director's cut that's a legitimate, not just some padded. I'd be, maybe it's something we check out, Jim, and maybe even bring it up onto the show.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, great question, Shashank.
While
The,
Shashank's on,
yeah,
maybe still with us, I just wanted to mention I've noticed looking at the movie theater websites in town, we currently have 5 Indian movies playing, which is kind of, I don't know if that impresses people. There's also a Chinese movie, but we have Chahava, we have well, we have a bunch of them. Ilti, and there's about 5 others, or 3 others rather. So we should probably hit
check
one of
out.
those up
It is, the
one of these
Indian
days.
diaspora is a big part of Winnipeg
Oh yeah,
now.
yeah.
You know,
And the gigantic Chinese hit Neja too
yeah,
is around too, which is now at like 1.5 billion already, or some crazy
some
number.
ridiculous
It's
amount.
been out for a month.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, I do want to, Shashank, great to see you here. If you're
Yeah.
here in the replay, heck, if you're here now, Shashank, please like, subscribe, and why don't you ringy ding that bell?
Not AI.
No, not at all.
The practical special effects.
All right. On that note, thank you all very much. You have a great time, and whether you like what we're saying, disagree with what we're saying, something we've missed, please comment down below.
Oh, check out the logo, Shashank.
And we are